Canada, the country that is definitely not the United States. The second largest country in the world, with most of its land being largely inhospitable. A country that is resource rich and formerly proud of said fact, and currently not very proud of said fact. And the place where there are more Tim Hortons fast food restaurants than there are grains of sand in the Sahara Desert. Many of the pictures or videos the average person sees of Canada showcase its stunning natural beauty, or the modern skyscrapers that adorn its major cities. As an average Canadian, however, your life will mostly comprise of this, and if you're wealthy enough, occasionally this. If you live in Canada, you will most likely be living in the suburbs of one of the country's major cities. Most of Canada's cities over the past several decades have primarily expanded outwards rather than upwards, given the abundance of land and the desire for many residents to attain the Canadian spin of the American dream, with a big house with a backyard and a garage with two or more cars, with one of them being quintessentially an SUV or a truck if you're in Alberta. In a vain attempt against nature, the Canadian will try to keep their yard green and neat, but this will be an exercise in futility, as most of the country, with the exception of British Columbia, will be a climate inhospitable for growth, at least for most of the year. It is difficult really to summarize what life is like in Canada given the characteristics of each of its major cities and their own spin on absolutely terrible weather. With the exception of maybe a few places where old people live, Canada is really cold. Anytime, however, you even think about complaining about the cold, a person who lived through most of their childhood in Flin Flon, Manitoba, or Wawa, Ontario, will manifest themselves out of thin air and explain how the current bone-chilling cold you're experiencing is not actually that bad. You may be going through the first stages of hypothermia, but remember, you should be thankful that the temperature isn't even colder. Don't like minus 20 Celsius? Well, the temperature just went 10 degrees colder. Also, to quote every American comedian that has stepped foot in Canada, like the rest of the world, Canada has the official use of the beautiful, makes-sensical Celsius and metric system, unlike the barbaric usage of Fahrenheit and imperial in the United States. However, Canadians still stubbornly express their height in feet and weight in pounds. I guess nobody's perfect. Canadians absolutely adore talking about how they in general are a hardy people that can almost biologically withstand the elements. They say this with a straight face while they wake up in their natural gas heated homes and drive their climate controlled cars to their natural gas heated office buildings. Canadians love their hockey, and drinking large quantities of beer, they combine those activities as much as possible. As winters in Canada are cold, dark, and for most people miserable, Canadians in general find ways to pass the time by snuggling in a warm blanket with a double-double of hot Timmy's coffee and a joint of indica, while the new episode of that show that you really need to watch on Netflix or HBO or whatever plays. With a few regional exceptions, Canadians speak an easily understandable accent of the English language, not that different than standard American English. If you want to hear an example of the general Canadian accent, well, I'm speaking in it right now. The exception to this rule is if you want to park your car by the bar in Newfoundland, or you're gonna go for a drink with your buds in rural Saskatchewan. There's also a bunch of Canadians that speak French in Quebec and like other places, but whatever. Many First Nations Canadians speak low tempo with an S sound being replaced with the SH like in a shirt. I will not try to imitate the accent as I don't feel like having the Social Justice Warrior Brigade attack. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and those of you who consider yourself as neither or both, Canada has experienced quite the liberalization over the last decade or so. Most liberal causes 10 or 20 years ago were generally for the legalization of gay marriage and marijuana, which most Canadians were overwhelmingly supportive of. Now, in general, the liberal causes have become basically how you can never state a single word without offending anyone, and trying to root out racism and sexism and any other kind of ism, whether there is a presence of it or not. Now, going back to First Nations and Inuit Canadians. In general, the prosperity that many first, second, and third generation immigrant Canadians have experienced has largely not been shared by the country's Aboriginal population. Rates of depression, alcohol abuse, and suicide are much higher in these communities than the general population. Redneck conservatives love to state that it's the natives' own fault, because they're degenerates that should have their financial privileges revoked, and the only cure for their situation is good old fashioned hard work. Social justice warriors, on the other hand, love to postulate that everything that has befallen natives is the white man's fault, and the white man should be kept accountable for all eternity. Everything in Canada is expensive. Whether it be meat, fish, or produce, you will likely pay more than what residents of the US are paying. Want to get a Canadian cell phone plan? Well, Canadians pay some of the highest rates for mobile data in the world. Canada's a big country, and the best way to explore it is by car. But, just so you know, depending on the province, you will pay on average between $700 and $1,800 a year in car insurance. Do you not feel like driving for days to get to other parts of Canada? So you'll just fly instead. It'll likely be cheaper to go on vacation in Mexico, or sometimes even in Europe. Travel within Canada is quite expensive given taxation and a low market competition environment given the presence of only a few local airlines. Are you a smoker? Well, there's a financial incentive for you not to be, as a pack of cigarettes can be around $20, which is astronomically higher than many other parts of the world. Do you like going out to the bar and having a premium beer with your friends? Well, don't be surprised if the beer costs $10. Oh, it'll be a social faux pas for you not to tip 15%. But the thing that is the most expensive is housing. Unless you want to live in a small village surrounded by farmland in the rolling prairies, or an Atlantic fishing community with over 200% unemployment, you will likely be paying north of $500,000 for a house. In some of Canada's major cities, you will pay over $1 million for a home, which is many multiples of the average salary. As the climate is cold, most detached housing and even smaller apartments are made out of wood composite, given its better insulation than other materials. When the houses are finished, many are covered up with a brick veneer as an allusion to the outside world that the residents of these houses don't live in a matchbox. If you ever visit Canada during the winter, you may notice that a sizable portion of the population wears Canada Goose, which is the quintessential status symbol of wealth for outerwear. Whilst it is generally the stereotype that it's mostly rich Asians that wear Canada Goose, there is a similar parallel for rich white Canadians to wear Arc'teryx. Now, some do actually properly utilize their jackets by hiking in minus 20 Celsius on mountaintop blizzards, but most just want to display their status when walking on the street from business meeting to business meeting. If you're an independent immigrant to Canada, that is, not a refugee, you will realize that unless you're in a very sought out and specialized profession, it will likely not be an easy task to find equivalent employment to what you had in your home country. This is contrary to belief across the world that Canada is this magical land of opportunity where jobs and six-figure paychecks are just handed to you the second that you arrive. Many immigrants will have to settle for work in low-skilled jobs, at least for a few years while they try to build contacts or take university equivalency courses to have their foreign education recognized by Canadian institutions. So despite all the negatives noted in this video, why is Canada still at an influx of so many immigrants across the world? Well, Canada is still one of the safest, cleanest, opportunist countries in the world. When comparing to the United States, as Canadians love to do, and as I have done throughout this video, the country in general has less of a polarization between right-wing and left-wing ideals, and a larger social safety net. As a Canadian, you will find solace that most of your fellow countrymen, save a few freaks, actually hate the cold. And it's always nice to find a common topic to discuss while you're shivering away, waiting for public transit to arrive. Now, as disclaimer, most of the information provided here is meant to be taken as informative satire. So please, don't tell my boss and get me fired from my job as a rutabaga farmer in Lucan, Ontario. Rutabaga is the best kind of bega.